Welcome back to the Our View podcast. On today's episode, I welcome my guest, Eric Harris. Eric is Director of Public Policy at Disability Rights California. Join our conversation as we discuss the intersectionality of being Black and disabled, the importance of including people with disabilities in on community engagement conversations, and areas where the local, state, and federal laws can be improved to better assist those who have disabilities. So, welcome to the Our View podcast. On today's episode, I welcome my guest, Eric Harris. Eric, let's get right into this conversation. I'm so excited for the topics we have planned to discuss. So, can you tell us a little bit more about who Eric Harris is?
Yes. So my name is Eric Harris, and first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm an African American male. I was born with congenital hip dislocation, and so I have nerve damage in my left leg, and my right foot and right ankle, and I am a wheelchair user. I was born in Northern California in the East Bay area, Berkeley, and I grew up in Sacramento. I went to college in Arizona, and I played wheelchair basketball in high school and in college. I actually um, went to college on a wheelchair basketball scholarship. And then following college, I went to the University of Oregon School of Law, and I graduated from there. And then I actually did some work in Washington, D.C., some political work, and now back in Northern California. And for the most part, what I do is policy work. I really care about creating policies and changing policies so that they help marginalized communities, especially African Americans, especially people with disabilities, but really all marginalized communities, making sure that they're spoken for and that they have a seat at the table when it comes to decision making.
That is so fantastic. And before we started recording, I thanked you for taking the time out to speak with me, and I wanted to make sure that I said that because I've said it many times on my podcast. The stories of people of color, African Americans, and especially men, African American men who have disabilities, our stories are not told. And so I am happy to share this platform with you to have this discussion and talk about your life and all of the great things that you've accomplished, some of which you just mentioned. So thank you again so much for sharing your time with me this morning. And so you mentioned that you were born with congenital hip dislocation. Can you explain what that is and how it has impacted your life?
Yes. So when I was born with my hip dislocated. I know that that is kind of difficult to imagine for most folks, but yeah, I was born with my left hip dislocated, and so I had nerve damage. So some of my joints and some of my muscles were weakened. I had multiple surgeries before I was a couple of years old, as a baby, and then as a toddler, so doctors could do as much as they could to make sure that I had as many opportunities as I could, not only to walk, to feel my legs, but just to live and survive. I was told many times growing up, and really really young. I'm talking toddler age, and before the age of 5, was told that I might not fully be able to walk later in life. I was told many things when it came to what I would or would not be able to do. But truth be told, I had plenty of opportunities, being in Sacramento, being in Northern California, around the Bay Area. I went to Stanford Children's Hospital as a child, and then transferred over to Shriners Hospital, which is a children's hospital. They have children's hospitals all throughout the country that are free and offer services for individuals with limb disabilities as well as those who have burn injuries. But really, my parents, my family, and my friends are the ones who have uplifted me through all that I've been through. I would say that they have empowered me. And having my disability has really empowered me as well. It's really given me opportunities, opened doors for me, allowed me to meet amazing people around the world, allowed me to participate in a sport, wheelchair basketball and wheelchair softball, that I really care about deeply. And so that's why I feel like it's important for me to give back through the work that I do now, and make sure that I'm fighting for people with disabilities, for African Americans, because it's all the sacrifices that have been made and the things that people have done. My life with my disability has really empowered me and made me a better person.
I'm so glad to hear you say that because part of my goal in creating the Our View brand and the awareness company and consulting company is that I want to change the tone of conversation about disabilities. So to hear you say that your disability has empowered you is the best thing I could have ever heard. And I can definitely agree. For me, you mentioned your parents. For me, my parents as well, my whole family. I mentioned on the podcast, my mom is one of 7 children. My dad is one of 10. So my family, my cousins, and the extended family, they have all just empowered me. And as you mentioned, your diagnosis and your prognosis and everything that the doctors have said may have not been the best, and you hear a lot of negative things about what you won't be able to do and how you'll have to live your life, but it truly does make a difference in my case, and it sounds like in your case as well, that having the support of your family really makes a difference and does allow you to uh, make you realize your reality of, yes, I have to do things differently, but I can still do things and I can still be successful, and like you said, go travel around the world and meet people and start great relationships and friendships with people. So I appreciate you saying that your disability has empowered you. That's so powerful. Yeah, so thank you so much for that. You are now a special advisor for strategic partnerships and community engagement at Disability Rights California. Can you get into the importance of including people with disabilities in community engagement? I know for myself, I work for a nonprofit I work for a nonprofit called Build Jake's Place here in New Jersey. We build inclusive playgrounds. So we have currently 2 playgrounds that we've built, and we are before COVID-19 hit. We were working with 7 other townships here in the state to build new playgrounds. And for us, community engagement and including people with disabilities in that engagement has been so key to getting these playgrounds built, and just the raising awareness about disabilities within those communities where we are building has been so important. So can you talk about your work with strategic partnerships and community engagement with Disability Rights California?
Yes, absolutely. So, as we know, and I talk about it all the time, just the importance of having people with disabilities at every table, every decision-making table, every power table. It is crucial to have people with lived experience with disabilities, just because our perspective is so unique. I once had a friend tell me that living with a disability is like living through an obstacle course every day. You have to be creative. You have to figure out everything that you're going through. You have to plan ahead. And you have to be prepared if you try to go somewhere, you try to do something, and you're essentially told, no, you can't go. So I think that having somebody with lived experience with a disability in a position to make partnerships and engage with the community is crucial. A lot of the partnerships that Disability Rights California has done is really intentional, and it's with the disability community specifically. We are an organization with 100 lawyers who work very hard. But as I'm sure you know, and as your listeners know, California has 40 million people. And if just based on kind of the generous statistics that 1 in 4 approximately have a disability, that's 10 million people with a disability in California, and we have 100 lawyers. So just on the numbers alone, those 100 lawyers aren't going to be able to communicate with every single person with a disability in the state of California. They're not going to
Right.
be able to connect with every single person. And so, my position, my job is essentially to engage with the community and make sure that the community knows what DRC is capable of doing, what DRC is able to do, but also what individuals can do and what parents can do for themselves and for their families. If they have a child with a disability, they can do their own self advocacy. They can do their own kind of engaging with politicians and elected officials. And so that's really what my position is. It's to make some of the connections by connecting some dots, but then also making sure that the community knows the work that the disability advocates are doing, making sure that they know what their rights are, making sure that they know that they're educated when it comes to these policies and some of these changes in laws. And so I just think it's crucial, and it shouldn't just be disability organizations that are doing this. Every organization, every company should have a disability perspective, folks who reach out to the disability community and other marginalized communities. So I just think it's really important, especially in the era that we're in now with technology, of course, social media, of course, different platforms of communication. It's just so important. And it's really easy to do now to reach so many people with literally the click of a button.
Yeah, that is so true. I love what your friend said about living with a disability is like an obstacle course. And it is truly, it's so true. The planning ahead and just, you never know what awaits for you when you get to that destination. Even last night, we're still in the middle of the sheltering in place everywhere. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And just last night, I said to my mom, I said, well, it's supposed to snow possibly early next week here in New Jersey. I said, I have to go to the store tomorrow because I have to get some snacks. And she said, "Oh, I didn't realize it was supposed to snow." And I said, "Yeah, well, I like you said, planning ahead. I look ahead at the weather, see what the weather's going to be like, because I might want to go out Tuesday, and if I don't look ahead, it might be that's the day it snows. So I always look ahead, and even if it doesn't snow, that's fine. But just the planning ahead is something that I always have to pay attention to, and I I think, the work that you're doing is very important because I can remember I can remember being, younger, a child, and just, the difficulty that it was to try to find, resources available for myself with having a disability. So the creation of Disability Rights California, I think, and other organizations like that are very, very much needed right now, and very important to have, and to have the perspective of someone who has a disability is also tremendously important. And so I'm glad to hear that you are doing that work. And with the numbers that you just mentioned, with all of the population, the total population in California, and the amount of that population who have a disability is, it's tremendous. It's huge. So, uh, the work that you're doing and other organizations are doing around the country is so important. So I want to get into a little bit of a discussion about intersectionality of disability and race. Both you and I are African American men who have disabilities, and uh, over the last few months, in the last year, this has been a topic of conversation that has come up quite often, of intersectionality. And I want to just talk about your perspective of being an African American man with a disability, and what types of difficulties you have encountered because of those two things.
Oh man. So, um, you know, I recognize how unique I am, both as a person with a disability in some of the spaces that I'm in, as well as an African American in some of the spaces that I'm in. Um, and it hits me, especially as I went through school. I was often the only person using a wheelchair, in various spaces. Um, I would often be in many situations be the only African American. And then as I kind of grew, especially as a young man, I recognized different things. I experienced different things, different levels of discrimination, and so I recognize kind of what challenges are out there. But I also viewed them as opportunities to educate, especially in both the disability community and the African American community. Before coming to DRC, I was a board member of the local NAACP, as well as a legislative advocate of the statewide NAACP of California. And it was important that I was in the rooms that I was in for the NAACP, but also representing people with disabilities and making sure that the leadership in the NAACP and other Black organizations recognize that there are members of our community who have disabilities, and not just people in wheelchairs, but people with mental health disabilities. As you know, and as I'm sure your listeners know, the stigma around mental health is ridiculous, and especially in the Black community, as well as the Latino community and others. The Black community looks at, our men in particular as macho, or having to do, or we view it as, you got to be tough, you can't be a punk, you got to fight through it. And we even view that when it comes to mental health disabilities, and that's a problem. It's caused a lot of Black men with mental health disabilities to stay hidden, or to kind of hold back. And what I try to represent, and what I try to speak on, is the importance of everybody being prideful in exactly who they are. And that means everything of who they are. So that means that African Americans be proud of being African Americans, that people with disabilities be proud of being people with disabilities, because you never know who's watching, you never know who's listening. I've been in situations where I've been around parents with children with disabilities who often, try to hold their child back, try to say, oh, my kid can't do that, or I don't want my kid to get hurt. And I think that having pride in all that you are, and being lifted up by leadership, whether it's elected officials or business executives or nonprofit organizers. It's so important that all of us are recognized in our completeness. And so, you know, as everybody else has, I've lived through life and experienced different things. And sometimes what I recognize and what I see when it comes to some of these incidents that have happened, and of course they've happened throughout history, but regarding police interaction with individuals who are African American, with the Black community, with Black people. Um, those interactions have been often terrible, and something that I always keep in mind, and I'm sure many people with disabilities keep in mind, that a lot of times when we see some of these individuals who are mistreated by police, killed by police, abused by police, oftentimes they're not just Black men. Of course, most of them are Black men first, and we recognize that, and they're seen as Black men and as a threat. But a lot of times, these are Black men with mental health conditions as well,
Right.
and with other disabilities as well. And so, that hits folks a different way. We can all develop disabilities at different points in our lives. I was born with my disability. A lot of the people that I work with and work around have had disabilities later in life, whether it's through accidents, through car accidents, or just over time, people obtain different disabilities. I know during the pandemic, we could talk about mental health disabilities. During a pandemic, being alone all the time and being kind of enclosed in your house and not communicating with anybody else physically, that can impact somebody's mental health.
Right.
And so all of these things are important to talk about, and it's so important that we recognize that somebody who has a mental health disability, who's a white straight male, has a completely different and unique experience to a person who is an African American male or an African American woman with a mental health disability who might have grown up in poverty, or any number of intersections. We talk about the LGBTQIA plus community, members of that community who are also African American, who also have disabilities, experience completely different and unique levels of discrimination. And it's important that we recognize that, and that we do what we can to fight against it.
Thank, thank you so much for that such complete answer. That was I loved so much of what you said, and I think one of the big things is what you mentioned last there is that everybody has their different experiences. Um, us being born with our disabilities and people developing disabilities later in life, and uh, the mental health aspect is so huge, and that is something that I am going to be addressing more often on this podcast: mental health, disabilities, and just I loved what you said also about having pride in who we are as total beings. If it's being disabled and black or whatever it is, just having pride and uh, celebrating that and who we are, and just embracing it, I think is a really big and important thing to mention and highlight there. In your introduction, you mentioned a lot of the accomplishments that you have achieved in life. You graduated law school, you interned in different law offices, and you interned for Representative Barbara Lee. You worked and interned at the Democratic National Convention and for President Obama's reelection campaign. And that was I loved reading that in your bio. When I saw that, I was like, wow, that's really cool. So I know the Americans with Disabilities Act is like uh, the big law that was passed to assist with making things better for people with disabilities in the United States. But having a background in law, as you do, and having interned for some political figures and political uh, organizations, where do you feel that the laws within the United States can be improved to better assist those who live with disabilities?
That's a great question. My experiences have been across the board just amazing.
Mhm.
Locally in Sacramento, working for a city council member, statewide, doing policy work in the state capitol, with the state legislature, and then, of course, nationally with Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who represents the East Bay area, as well as um, um, working for the Democratic National Committee. Um, I would say that the ways that we can improve that, and I say we, um, America, government, policymakers, we can improve in a lot of ways. When it comes to equal access, that's probably number one. Making sure that people with disabilities have equal access to housing, equal access to employment, equal access to any financial resources that they need, equal access to healthcare. equal access to transportation. All of these are so important. I mean, you talk about living in New Jersey. I live in California. Those For a lot of people with disabilities, we've had to make those choices to live in places where we have access to as much as we need. We oftentimes need to be in large cities as people with disabilities, just because more of the resources that can help us are in these large cities and in these large metropolitan areas, as well as um, being in these large cities can help us with transportation issues, can help us with accessibility when it comes to building accessibility, school accessibility. A lot of us can't live in parts of the country where you have either terrible weather, you have inaccessible buildings, you have old structures. And I know you live on the East Coast, so I'm sure you see up close and personal kind of what old traditional building, old
Yes.
traditional streets, all of these things. And so I just think that, it's so important, to recognize that all these things can be improved, and that it's on us disability advocates as well as people with disabilities to continue to push for these things. And part of that comes with people with disabilities stepping up and leading, and taking on challenges, and coming to the seat at the table. And if we don't have a seat at the table, to create our own table until we get a seat at that table. Um, and so, really, it's every area of policy, every area of law. People with disabilities need to be involved and thought about, and up until this point we haven't been. So that's, the importance of a Disability Rights California, a Disability Rights New Jersey, a Disability Rights New York, a Disability Rights Texas. All of these organizations fight on behalf of people with disabilities, as well as all the grassroots organizations throughout the country. And so that's why, the fight continues. My boss always says that our goal should be, as Disability Rights California, our goal should be to put ourselves out of business, to do the work so well that people with disabilities don't need to have disability advocates anymore, but
Right.
that the laws are already changed and we don't need to have. But unfortunately, up until now, and probably for the time beyond now, we will need disability advocates. We will need advocates in all areas. So I'm really, really excited to do the work that we're doing, because we're trying to make a difference.
Yeah, that's I love what your boss says. That's the same thing we say for the nonprofit I work with, that hopefully one day we won't have to advocate so hard for inclusive playgrounds, because they will be the norm, and every playground that's being built will be built to meet the needs of those with disabilities. So so I really can relate to to what your boss said about that. So that's really cool. And it's so important that having this discussion with you, it's so important that people know that the disability rights organizations, they exist throughout the country, and it's important that that we can connect with those types of organizations to reach out to them and advocate uh, for things that we need, and things that we would like to see, and things that we want to better improve. And I love that you use the word we, because it is a joint effort from everybody. I think everybody has a role to play in this. And we all can work together to make some changes and make some great things happen. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you became involved with wheelchair basketball? I personally, growing up when I was younger, even now as an adult, I uh, didn't play any adaptive sports, mostly because I remember growing up, uh, there didn't seem to be much available. And
Mhm.
if it was very difficult to find. I live in New Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia, and there were things that were available, but they were like so far away from where I lived. So, can you talk about your experience of how you got involved with wheelchair basketball? And I know you said you got a scholarship for it and all of that. So I'd love to hear some more about that conversation.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Growing up, I was always participating in sports. So growing up, I walked using leg braces, and I didn't even, honestly, even in like the first 13 or 14 years of my life, I didn't even consider using a wheelchair because I could walk. So I would play basketball, baseball, flag football, tennis, golf, like every sport you could think
Oh,
of. I
wow.
just wanted to keep playing. And it wasn't until I was in high school and I tried out for my high school golf team, and was disappointed that I didn't make it. There was some controversy around that decision, but I didn't make the team. And my dad actually looked for adaptive sports in the area of Northern California. I'm located in Sacramento. I'm from Sacramento, and the closest wheelchair basketball program is in Berkeley, for the most part. There's still some teams that are a little closer, but Berkeley had a team, and a program for kids with disabilities. And so Berkeley is about an hour and 20 minutes away. If I take the train, it's about 2 hours away. And I went to go check it out for the first time, and I just fell in love. I didn't know what to expect, but when I got there, I saw other kids that looked like me, that were from parts of the Bay Area that I identified with, parts of the East Bay and Oakland and in Richmond, California, as well as parts of San Francisco. And so, I just fell in love with the sport. I wanted to do it every day. I would travel by myself to Berkeley every week to practice, and that was, I was 13 or 14 years old, taking the train to the Bay Area, and with my basketball chair and my backpack of clothes to change into, and I would come back that evening, and or sometimes I would stay for the whole weekend because a lot of my friends were on the team. I have family members who are in the Bay Area, so I would stay in the area, and um and I fell in love with it so much that I just wanted to play it all the time. And I was able to earn a scholarship to go play college wheelchair basketball for the University of Arizona. I was able to travel to Australia and play for under 20 USA team, and just on and on, just so many different cool experiences. um, as you said, there aren't teams in every city. So
Right.
sometimes, even in high school, we would have to travel to Dallas or Seattle or Philly or LA, to be able to play Wisconsin, um,
Wow.
while I was in high school. So it was a really cool experience. I'm a 15, 16-year-old kid, and I'm able to travel all over the country to play this sport. And it really um, gave me some experiences, allowed me to make some connections and build my confidence. And it's just a wonderful sport. And I played wheelchair softball. There's wheelchair tennis. There's wheelchair track, quad rugby. There's every sport that you can think of. There's an adaptive form of that sport, and a lot of us are really excited about the Paralympics coming up. Of course, they had to be delayed from 2020 to 2021, but the Paralympics are going to take place very soon in Tokyo, and we are ecstatic. We have some amazing athletes, men and women athlete, male and female athletes, who are the best in the world at what they do, and I encourage everybody to pay attention and watch. When I was younger, I was always frustrated that I couldn't watch the Paralympics as easily. But now, networks and online websites are making adjustments and trying to show these platforms and show these games on their platforms. And so I just encourage everybody to check them out and really enjoy it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story of your experience. And I wanted to make sure I brought that up because, um, as I said, I remember not not having access to or not realizing there were um, accessible and adaptive sport programs that existed. And as you said, they're getting a lot better now, and they're showing the Paralympic Games on the internet and on different networks when they come on. So I think it's very important to stress that these programs do exist, and just encourage people to get involved, even as children, as adults, just to stay as active as possible and uh, meeting people who look like you, as you said. Like there were a lot of people who look like you, and just having that network and that community of people to share a common thing as playing a sport, which is what a lot of people are interested in doing, and just don't know of the best way to do it and make it happen. So just make sure you search around in your local communities in your state, and just find out where the nearest adaptive sport programs are. To wrap this up, this conversation, which I thoroughly enjoyed, can you share one or two things about what you feel people most misunderstand about you, your diagnosis, or just what people misunderstand about those who have disabilities in general?
That's a great question. I think that the biggest thing that I try to get across to other people is that disability should never be viewed as a negative. And I know, we've seen it, and we've heard it across national news, across especially in um, Hollywood and other ways that disability is perceived. It's viewed as a danger, or it's viewed as such a sad time, or it's viewed as such a challenge that we have to overcome. But I want people to kind of flip that a little bit and to view disability as an asset. Having a disability gives me a perspective and allows me to engage and use ideas and use part of my background that other people might not have thought about. And it also opens doors for me. I'm able to participate in a sport that I wouldn't have ever participated in if I didn't have a disability. I'm able to meet people throughout the country and throughout the world who care about people with disabilities and have family members with people with disabilities, and it just adds and continues to build. So my network and your network, I'm sure, and others can grow exponentially because of our lived experience, and we're
Mhm.
able to influence what other people and how other people view disability. But really, it ultimately is viewing disability in the positive, viewing disability as part of who we are, the same way you and I view each other as African American men, the same way we anybody else in the LGBTQIA plus community views themselves in that community, or women who are prideful, all and it just goes on and on. Disability is only part of our life experience. It's a big part of our life experience, but it's just a part. It's part of who we are. And so, for anybody to ignore that, for anybody to say something like, "Oh, I don't even see you as a person with a disability," or "I don't even see you as a black person," it's like that'd be disrespectful to me. I'm prideful of who I am and what I represent in every area. And so, I just think that that's the biggest thing that I try to message to other folks, that I say, hey, look, man, you're your complete self, I'm my complete self, and I wouldn't be me if I didn't have a disability. So that's what I would say is probably the biggest message that I try to send to all people with and without disabilities.
Um, thank you so very much for your time. Again, I appreciate it. I really enjoyed this conversation. And I hope that we are able to connect again sometime in the future on another topic. And I will definitely let you know if I find myself out that way anytime in the coming years, and hopefully connect with you in person. So, is there anything, any websites or anything that you want to mention that where people can get in touch with you, or with the with any organizations that you work with?
Disability Rights California is really easy to find. You can, of course, just Google Disability Rights California, and it'll be the first site that comes up. And the website is Disability Rights with an S at the end, ca.org. And wherever you are in the country, there's a disability rights organization. It's a protection and advocacy organization in your state. And so all of them have, websites or social media pages. And so they are very easy to access, and they'll be able to give you some information. But of course, I mean, specific to your disability, there might be other organizations that might kind of be more in line with your circumstance. And so I encourage everybody to Google or to look up different organizations that represent different disabilities, folks who are vision impaired, folks who are hearing impaired, folks who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, folks with mental health disabilities. It is crucial that we find support and we find community. I know that people with disabilities, all different types of disabilities, can go through challenging times. During COVID, it's been a very challenging time. So being able to find a community to be a part of, being able to find a support system is so crucial. So yeah, I would say that those organizations and as well as nonprofits that are just doing really great work, especially. Um, the NAACP does amazing work throughout the country and in everybody's local city and everybody's state. So I would encourage everybody to support their local NAACP, as well as other organizations. Plenty of LGBTQIA plus organizations that we need to support, and all of us can do our part, as we said earlier.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric, for your time today and for this great conversation. I really appreciate it. And I will definitely be in touch with you soon.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.
Thanks. All right.